The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Chatting with Jocelyn. I am so glad to have you here with me, and I have a really fun guest. And I mean fun because he's going to make you think. He's going to turn you on your head. I've talked with Elliot 2 or 3 times. We haven't gotten in depth. We just kind of banter back and forth because we're always in very public places. And he's made me think, and coming from the background that I have, it's a little scary. It's showing me that, boy, we need to shut up. We need to sit down. We need to listen. We need to listen to people smarter than us. And it's not politicians, and it's not professors, and it's not teachers, and it's not police officers. And this is not slamming on everybody, because we've all been trained. We've all been brainwashed. We've all been, what's the word I want? Educated the way they want us to think. And what we're finding out in today's world, especially right now, is that there is so much deception, there is so much lying, there is so much controversy, and it all stems from 1 or 2 items. So Elliot, Axelman, is here. Thank you for coming to my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, I am too. We're similar. We both EMS. Alu is a medic. I didn't make it that far, but that's okay. I got as high as I could without becoming a medic. So there was a little connection there and bantering. But this guy, I'm telling you, he can write. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books that he has written. And the one, I thought there was one, typical me. There's one, oh, can I buy your book? I bought your book. So I bought the book, I read it, I've highlighted it. Yes, people, I read it. And he marches in here with 7 other books. I have a lot of reading to do. We're going to dive in. We're going to keep it simple. Definitely going to have you come back because I want you to talk on each one of the books. And I think it would be really cool if we made this into a series. So this book is The Blueprint for Liberty. And he talks about taxation, socialism, gun control, indoctrination, surveillance, and war. We're going to have to move quick because it's a short show. But I think if we touch on it, get some feedback from you, we can deep dive into more of these subjects. So again, welcome. All right, in reading this book here, the first Part 1, why must we start anew? And I don't want to dive into gun control, but what are you talking about? We have to start anew. I thought we have a constitution. I know they have strayed far, far, far from it. What do we have to start anew with?
The American experiment, I think the entire experiment of a republic form of government with 50 states and a federal government, it's failed. We've seen over the past 240 years, we have 2 fundamental issues, 2 big issues that I kind of discuss in the book, and they're related and they're different. One big issue is that DC politicians, the people, the elites in DC and the regulators and bureaucrats, but especially Congress, has taken over way too much power, increasingly more power every day for the past 240 years. And every day for the past 240 years, I and you and our ancestors, so me, my father's father, who worked for the federal government as a judge in the military, but all of us, our ancestors, have been saying every day for 240 years, we really need to do something different. Let's elect someone different. Let's fix the government, make it smaller. Yet it's only grown bigger and bigger, as we see now for 29 trillion reasons, right? So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again, every day for 240 years and expecting different results. So the federal government's never going to shrink. There are a few times Trump actually did some good, some bad, mostly the status quo. He did a few good things. He did shrink a few federal government things. He gave a lot of land back to Utah and Nevada that Obama stole. He gave back, I think, millions of acres. He did a few small things to give, power back from DC back to the states. But for the most part, the trend goes up and up as far as federal government power. Congress, they don't do much, but the regulators, the judges, the other laws, OSHA and CDC now, who apparently own your body, CDC owns your buildings, tells you can't evict anyone, and they own your building. So every day it gets worse and worse. And my friends, like my 4 friends running for CD1 in Congress now, they're all friends of mine. I love them all. They think, if you elect me, I'm going to totally fix Washington, D.C. Again, I've heard this every day for 240 years, me, my dad, my father's father. At some point, you have to say, let's do something different. So that's one reason why I say the American experiment has failed. The other big reason is, and why I support division and a peaceful separation of the states, so states can govern themselves, which was the original design, to have
plan.
states almost 99.9% governing themselves.
Meaning using the word state sovereignty?
Yeah.
Okay.
State, independence and the federal government barely doing anything. The thing about that is that every state is different, as I've been saying for a long time. And at some point, I used to fight Californians. No, you're left, I'm right, you're bad. I'm sick of fighting. I want to have peaceful separation. My friends in California, I have a lot of friends I love in California, like Marcus, who worked on the Progressive book with me. He's progressive. He wants California to leave the union and be more progressive. They don't like DC. They don't even like Biden. They're a lot more progressive. They have a whole different lifestyle than Biden. They don't like Pelosi. They don't like Newsom even. They have a different progressive lifestyle. I've been fighting them for years now, since I entered politics. I'm sick of fighting them. I want to be friends with Marcus, but divorce. I don't want to live with him, right? I wouldn't want to be married to him. So if you and your spouse get along or don't get along, but if you're fighting and have fundamentally different views of life, pro-life and pro-choice, pro-gun, anti-gun, you can't live in the same house when one wants to have guns and homeschool, and one wants to go to government schools and have a total ban on firearms and total socialist regulation of the economy. We have fundamental different ideologies. Two different groups of states, more like 3 or more, but the right and the left can't get along, and that's why we need a peaceful separation. So it's balkanizing the states, but it's also the DC politicians have gotten out of hand. So it's those 2 fundamental issues why I say we have to start over again, which people are increasingly agreeing with me about that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Wow. That's a whole bunch all up right at the top. But it makes sense. So how would that work if every state had its sovereignty? Would we not have DC at all?
Ideally, that would be a dream come true. We don't need DC. All they do is they take our money and they give back most of it, maybe 70, 80%, and they pocket the rest and they waste it on administration, overhead, and they give it back with strings attached in the form of grants. They say, we'll give you $1 billion for a DHS grant to your state police or DHS if you do sobriety checkpoints once every month, which nobody wants that. It's bad. It's all bad. They take our money, they blackmail us with their own money. If I stole your money and said, I'll give you back 80% of it, but I'm going to extort you, saying you have to come and wash my car every day, you really would not be very happy about that arrangement, right? So how about you just I don't steal your money in the first place? That's the best, right?
How about that? How about the original 10 commandments?
Yep, don't steal. So
Don't
I
steal,
think...
don't murder, don't covet your neighbor's wife, don't covet your neighbor's property. How about, and I thought that's where it all started, but yet we're nowhere near that, are we?
Yeah, and that's the foundation of what I think is a civilized society. And that's what I say throughout all my books, I think, is the foundation of a civilized society, as opposed to Neanderthals or something, is we respect self-ownership, property rights, consent. And these are things that, on its face, everyone would agree. I think 100% of people would agree, unless they're a sociopath, like really psychotic, they would agree that consent is important. Now, people only think of it in terms of the bedroom, but consent's important, if you think about it, also for money. If I take $1 million from you without consent, it's theft. With consent, it's a transaction that we agree to because we mutually benefit. So everything should require consent. And this is what, libertarians, anarchists, voluntarists are very, very much all about. They talk about consent. Everything should require consent. And this has been my evolution 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago when I was younger, a teenager. I didn't understand, taxation being theft. I thought there was some appropriate level, like on the Laffer curve, of appropriate taxation. When I went from conservative libertarian to full-on voluntarist, it wasn't the practical Laffer curve of the right level of taxation that got me, what made me full voluntarist and support taxation being theft, is it's just wrong on principle. So on principle, it's wrong to steal.
And that's what DC is doing. So if we go to the original Constitution, because we know that has been so adulterated, it has been changed by the lawyers to move a comma, whatever. So it's nothing like its original is. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's nothing like the original was. in the original Constitution, the only taxes the federal government was supposed to take was for infrastructure, defense of the country, and I always forget the other one, trade.
And then an amendment was passed in
Right.
I think, around 1913 that allowed them to levy taxes, Congress to levy taxes directly. Before that, I think the states essentially gave them taxes. So it was passed by amendment, so technically it's constitutional. But again, nowadays, I don't even respect the Constitution because unless you get consent from me, so the Constitution is saying, your representatives theoretically consented to it. They don't represent me. They represent a majority of people in my state who vote, which is like 100,000 in New Hampshire.
Correct.
That's not even close to a majority of people, but even 99% can't take away my authority. I can only delegate rights that I have. I can't delegate your rights. So if there's a majority vote, 9 out of 10, that's still mob rule. So I don't support mob rule. But the biggest issues with the Constitution is the courts, because the Constitution itself says courts can interpret it. We have a few men who become gods when they put on black robes. They're lawyers who are turned into gods. They say, like the Supreme Court can say, the Constitution means this. And with Obamacare, with other big decisions, and I want to work on my next book, maybe all of the 100 worst Supreme Court cases, maybe just horrible cases where they say property rights don't exist. I already have a list of like 50 horrific cases where they say you don't own property, the government owns your property, shut up. I mean, horrific cases where they say if you have a farm, the government can put all the cameras they want on your farm and shut up. They can force union workers to come on your farm and recruit, union members. You have no property rights. And the courts have been allowed to totally reinterpret the Constitution. For instance, tomorrow, if there's a case that goes to the Supreme Court, and they can design it so that it goes to the court and is appealed all the way up, and they take a case that rules whether we have, firearm ownership. Thank God, Heller versus DC versus Heller was not great, not terrible, but it ruled that we do technically have some right to own firearms, not just in a militia, but also individually. But it could have been a lot better. What if next year, when Biden puts 13 members on the Supreme Court and he packs it, what if they rule that we have no right to bear arms? And here's my issue. A lot of conservatives who are my friends will say, I obey the Constitution, I obey police, I obey the law. I'm a law-abiding citizen, right? I'm law-abiding gun owner. Once the Supreme Court rules that becomes the precedent, which is federal law now, right? It's kind of like the law. If they rule that there's no right to bear arms, we have, an epidemic of gun violence because 30,000 people die every year, all firearms are banned in the U.S., like Australia. Those conservatives are now in a pickle, right? They say they're law-abiding. Are you going to give in your guns, or are you going to shoot the people that you say you love, police, judges, right? So that's where it becomes an issue, and that's why I realized, because of principle and practically, using the Constitution as an argument for your pro-freedom arguments, I think conservatives are so misguided because they're going to get trapped. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That puts together what I was reading in here. So we talked about gun control. So then you talk about, I'm going to stick to this because that'll keep me moving along.
And the important thing I have in there, and I think I have a graph, is that the reason I want people, especially in New Hampshire, where we are now, to give up on the United States is, like the graph shows, the right to bear arms has been plummeting, every few years since 1900 or so. It's been since 1934 with FDR, because he is the father of almost all that is bad in this world, in the United States. The right to bear arms has been plummeting consistently. Almost never do we have good news. The assault weapons ban expired in the 90s briefly. It sunsetted and they didn't renew it. But other than that, it's been all bad news, besides that one uptick for the last 100 years.
Meaning the politicians, D.C., chipping away at our right to bear arms. That's why it's going down.
And even Trump, what Trump did, in a sense, was the worst, because he didn't even pass a law, and it wasn't even a court case. He literally told the ATF, by executive order, to ban bump stocks. And they banned bump stocks, which is literally a cheap plastic part that costs a few dollars. And they did it not by banning bump stocks. They redefined, so they have definitions of, this is that, a trigger is this, you pull it back. They redefined bump stock to be a machine gun. Literally machine gun, fully automatic. So technically, look at definitions: machine gun, M16, machine gun, Gatling gun. Bump stock is now literally called a machine gun. Meaning super federally illegal, go to jail for decades and decades or life in prison if you own a bump stock, which my friends and family do. Now it's federally illegal, and Trump did that. So Trump, again, did a lot of good, a lot of bad. Because I'm a voluntarist, I'm not really Republican or Democrat. In that sense, I can view him both ways. I've written articles about the 5 best things he's done, the 5 worst things he's done. The bump stock, even Obama and Eric Holder, when he was AG, they said, we can't ban bump stocks with the ATF. It's a big enough deal, we have to pass a law in Congress. But Trump actually did something even Obama wouldn't dream of doing.
So by changing a definition, that doesn't make it a law, but by changing the definition, it fell underneath that law?
It's a law. I mean, again, that's the big problem. And I think I mentioned it in the book, the ATF, a federal agency under the DOJ, they essentially make laws. They say we're writing rules, they say they're rules, but they make laws, they will enforce them, and you will go to prison for life. So it's a law. If you thought that the legislative branch, which is Congress, writes legislation, and legislators write legislation, no, you're totally wrong. That's how it's supposed to work.
Thank you for saying that, because I'm like, I just did a
branch-
show last week on that.
Yeah,
And
well,
now you've totally
when
blown me out of the water.
One of the few videos I watched back growing up in Lakewood, very Orthodox community, one of the few videos I saw was actually on a CD disc my cousins had. On the computer was Schoolhouse Rock or something, or
Yeah.
I'm Only a Bill.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing, Schoolhouse Rock?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was I'm Only a Bill, and it explained the process, and I was somewhat interested in it. I wasn't interested in politics, but it was cute, the bill, I'm Only a Bill. And it explained the process, so I remember it. Legislative branch, make legislation.
Correct.
That's not how it works. Congress does nothing. I've heard it firsthand, secondhand from congressmen. They raise money all day. 24/7, they raise money for the
about
NRCC and
re-election
NDCC. Yeah.
money.
So they owe money to the committee chairs and the leadership, but the laws are written by the agencies. They pass the buck. Congress, they can say, I didn't pass the law, I'm not responsible. The agencies are faceless bureaucrats you can never hold accountable. What are you going to do? Go to the ATF and go beat up some guy in the ATF? You have no accountability. You can't call Pappas or Hassan, you're a congressman. They didn't do it. They don't care, but they didn't pass the law. It was the ATF. It was totally unrelated. So it's a way of denying, deflecting accountability.
Yep.
Because politicians, their biggest nightmare is accountability. They love non-controversy. They don't ever want to be controversial for either side. So here, with the bump stock ban, for instance, and with most gun control and most
can
laws,
say-
they do nothing. Yeah.
So my understanding is, this is why you're saying it's not working. So the executive branch of the federal government is the president, the vice president. The executive branch of New Hampshire is the governor. In some states, a lieutenant governor. The legislative branch is the Congress and Senate, federal, and the same here in your state. Then you have the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court, the Circuit Court, and the Supreme Court of the United States, and you have the same in every state. Mm-hmm. When I went to school, the executive branch enforced law. If they passed an executive order or an emergency order, because that's the new, term, it only applied to their administration. It did not apply to any federal and or state, if you're comparing them, employees. It only belonged to their executive branch. The court system, the judicial system, was supposed to opine, opinion, not legislate, and only if it came to their court. Mm-hmm. The only people that were supposed to make law is the legislative branch, and we have none of that happening. And right now, it is completely obliterated, like you're saying.
Yeah, the legislative branch is the one of the three that doesn't make laws. Like I said, they don't pass laws. Once every few years, it's a big omnibus bill that's mostly pork, and some bad laws stuck in there. But the regulatory agencies make laws, and they all have their own enforcement and SWAT
Which
teams.
is wrong, though.
Yep. And the judicial agencies, the judicial branch, the courts, they write laws. And you reminded me, they don't just, when they make a big opinion, Roe v. Wade, 100% abortion legal for all 50 states, 330 million people, abortion legal forever up until birth, and you can never reverse it because now it's set in stone. As Democrats remind us every day, it's the most constitutional right of all is abortion. Now, I forget which article in the Constitution says abortion is a constitutional right, but I trust Democrats. So they say that's the most constitutional of all rights. Obviously, it's not in the Constitution. But even further, they can write laws when they do these injunctions. Mm-hmm. Remember a few years ago when Trump would try to do anything, like secure our border with COVID, which now they recommend doing. One judge stuck his nose in and blocked it. So you don't even necessarily have to hear a case, I don't think. I don't think a case was brought to them.
Right.
Maybe technically a Democrat sued, but they can stick in an injunction saying, well, you can't do that. Trump, remember all the Babylon Bee fake satire?
Yep.
Trump blinks. Ninth Circuit does an injunction. He's not allowed to do that. Ninth Circuit blocks him doing that. He breathes. Ninth Circuit blocks it. The court blocks it. So they can block anything. And again, the courts have taken way too much power as well, the federal courts.
The point being, right, so it is nothing the way it should be at all. And delegating, I understand. And again, this is why this isn't working. It's broken big time. I forgot what I was just going to say. I do that every once in a while. Oh, you may not delegate your authority, yet they have. Mm-hmm. And all I can say to everything is, yet you have, yet they have, yes they are, yet they are.
And what it all comes down to is there's no punishment. Like I was telling you right before we went on air.
There you go.
And this is what I realized, and this was my speech at a 3-minute speech at Park Fest, and I think I got like 4th place or 3rd place or something. The 3-minute speech was that one of the important thing I got to at the end was that there's no punishments for federal government employees. The laws for us, which is, U.S. code, which is, billions of federal laws, they can't even count them all, right? We have infinite laws. They have punishments. Almost all of them have specific punishments. There's sentencing guidelines, which I'm writing about now in the book about criminal justice. Then they say you can get a punishment of 10 to 20 years in jail and a certain fine between $5,000 and $10,000, let's say. when we violate a law, there's a clear punishment, and we are punished. Prosecutors, federal prosecutors, 90% conviction rate, and 97% of all charges, they actually plead guilty. And those who go to trial, 90% guilty, 90% guilty by jury. When the federal government, like Biden, for instance, violates the Constitution, when Trump and the ATF violates the Second Amendment, clearly there's no punishment.
Correct.
Imagine if there were a punishment for the ATF, if everyone, let's say there was a punishment that says you're hanged if you violate the Second Amendment. Right now, we'd have every member of the ATF hanging in DC, right? And once one person is hanged, obviously, they wouldn't violate the Constitution.
It's a deterrent.
Again. Yeah. But there's no punishments. Almost, and as we see now we're talking about, Sussman and Clinton and all that with the Spygate or Clinton. No one's going to get punished. Once every, few decades, one person is a fall guy and goes to jail. But there's almost
That's not
no
a
accountability.
punishment.
Yeah.
In retrospect, that's not a punishment at all, is it?
Certainly not enough of a punishment. And the big politicians, congressmen, every congressman who put it this way, HR 127, which I hope passes, and your viewers will hate me for this. HR 127 is a bill right now in the U.S. House. I think like 215 Democrats sponsored it. And that's almost a majority right there, right? Like another 20 is a majority. It essentially bans all guns in the U.S. It says unless you can get President Biden to give you a gun license, you cannot own any firearm in the U.S. Obviously, he won't give you a license because Biden doesn't like you very much. Sorry.
Correct.
He won't give you a license. You have to get him to approve a license for you. So it bans all guns and I think ammo in the U.S. Every member who sponsored that, 215 Democrats in the House, and I assume some in the Senate, everyone who sponsored that bill violated the Second Amendment. Meaning, theoretically, not making a threat, if the punishment were hanging for violating the Constitution, they'd all be hanging. Those 250 members of Congress.
Right.
But we're never going to see congressmen, hanging or being punished for this, right? They proposed the bill, and that's why I say in the Constitution, in the 14th chapter, that I guess we won't have time to get to, is anyone who violates the Constitution or seeks to violate it by formally proposing a bill needs to be punished. If that's excommunication, nonviolent, or hanging, or something, there has to
Whatever
be
it is.
punishment for
Stepping
proposing.
down is not a punishment anymore because they just go to the private sector
They can
and make a
billions
lot
as
of
a
money
lobbyist,
and make billions of dollars. So, all right. So then I'm reading through here the ideal constitution. So this is at the end of Free Society. That's after going through the freedom of speech. Let's talk about the freedom of speech. We can do this.
I'm not allowed to talk.
Freedom of speech. Let's bring it right to the audience. So right now, today in New Hampshire and across the United States, where we can smell it, touch it, see it, we are going to the school board meetings of which we the people, let me remind you, we own the chairs in those schools. We own the microphones. We pay for the electricity. We pay for the heat. We own those buildings because that's our taxes that pay for it. It does not belong to the school board. It does not belong to the SAU. It does not belong to the town. It belongs to we the people, the taxpayers, the citizens, just to be perfectly clear in this world right now. So we're going to the school boards. We've had junk garbage, I'm trying not to swear, for a year and a half. We have 4 families. 1 out of 4 families has school-aged children. So the other 3 families, my kids have graduated, are paying for this. And happily so, I want children educated academically, and I want them to become functioning, useful citizens in this world. That's why I pay my taxes. Let's keep it going. But I'm paying taxes. They're not being educated. They're being taught the most despicable, disgusting sexual acts in the whole wide world. And I don't care who you are. That should never happen. That's in the home, not the despicable stuff, but proper sex education. CRT does not belong in the schools.
Corona fascism, the masks, it's child abuse. And I said a few weeks ago in an article, it's beyond child abuse. It's torture. When it was 100 degrees a few weeks ago, they turned off the ACs. They didn't want ventilation. They used to say ventilation's good to get rid of COVID. Now they say ventilation's bad because it might move COVID particles into the classroom. Turned off the ACs, forced the kids, abused them with masks all day. And once they realized they're going to die of heat stroke, because again, they will get heat stroke and die sitting it with masks, keeping their face hot, they started spraying them down with cool water spray bottles just to make sure they don't die. Again, it's torture. It's why I couldn't send my kids to a government-run school.
They sprayed them down with water
there
bottles?
There were a few articles about it in New Hampshire. A few months
I
ago.
completely missed that. So we go to the school board. We go and we fight them and we sign up. We sign up. We shouldn't have to sign up. We sign up and we say, we're going to speak. You get 3 minutes. Who died made you God? Who died and made you legislator? 3 minutes? We pay for you and everything that you're doing here. I get up to the microphone. I get to my 3 minutes. They've got gavels. They got freaking hammers, and they're banging on
Even
this
that's
desk.
a power trip. Once you give someone a gavel, oh my God.
And then they're up on a stage, because now there's so many of us. They're up on a stage, and they have this U shape. And then they have their support staff. I swear they called anybody that was ever on the school board forever and ever, amen. And then they put them there, and then they all wear their masks and their spit screens. And 3 minutes, they're banging, and you're like, I need to finish. I pay these taxes. I want to be heard. They gavel you, and then what do they do next? Flip. They flip the switch. They shut you off. Now in Londonderry, this week, was it? I think it was this week.
I think so.
Yeah. So they went and had a private meeting, a non-public meeting, made decisions, come back and say, we've made our decisions, bang, meeting over. A minute, 2 minutes, maybe. Turned the lights off. Are you kidding me? That is our property, our kids, our taxes. That's ours. And you're shutting us up. That is I think, the worst right now. Tangible freedom of speech that's being ripped away from us.
Yeah, I mean, with freedom of speech in the whole chapter about how the First Amendment has been totally destroyed and decimated. I'm going to do a whole book about the First Amendment, because freedom of speech and expression and worship, like we saw with corona fascism, when they said you literally can't gather, literally the First Amendment says you can gather, worship, free speech, expression, free press. All of those things were attacked with corona fascism. Dictator Sununu passed, I think, 86 executive orders and became a dictator because he ruled by executive order and didn't let the legislature have input for, I think, 16 months. A lot of them said no gatherings, no worship in churches, no freedom of speech. You can't, gatherings and speech and obviously press, that's a little more complicated how press is violated the freedom of press. But the big things were gathering and worship. And when we realized that in parking lots, even in drive-in, when they stayed in their own cars in churches in Kentucky or Virginia, started, when that was a crime, we realized it's not about the gathering, it's about maybe an attack on religion, which violates the First Amendment.
Correct. I mean, they just can't stop. They just can't stop. They are grabbing, they're like a giant octopus. They just can't suck up enough stuff and take away. And a lot of people say, you only give away, they can only take what you give away. Well, it's kind of true, but it's not true. Because, like you said, the punishment is there, and they have no problem hauling you off and dumping you in the deepest, darkest dungeon.
But ultimately, I do agree that, in general, we get the government we deserve. We deserve it. We've all been totally delinquent in keeping government on federal level, state, and local accountable over the years, and we've let them take this power and get away with it. And now, thank God, parents in New Hampshire, at least, I can only speak for my state, because of corona fascism, CRT, and a lot of the really disturbing sexual education of asking 5-year-olds what kind of threesomes they prefer and horrible things. Those 3 big reasons, a lot of parents are awake, and I didn't realize how energetic these, angry mama bears can get in New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah.
It's the most energy I've seen being in politics the past few years. I mean, there's tremendous energy because of corona fascism, CRT, so I'm glad people are fighting back now, but yeah, we've let them get away with it for too long.
Oh my goodness. We have so much more to talk about. I want to thank you so much for coming in and giving us the blueprint for Liberty 101. We have a lot more to go. So definitely I want you to come back. Thank you.
Please, I'd love to come back anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on Chit Chatting with Jocelyn. We'll see you next time, and share, because this is important. Everybody needs to know about this.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.